Would you like to be happy? Are you
I think
seeking
so.
happiness? Would you say you are in the pursuit of happiness? Well, you are in luck because today's episode, we're talking about why happiness is not the answer.
Not.
This is, yes, this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
Oh, what's up, Randy?
Have
Yeah.
you ever been in the pursuit of happiness? Have you ever tried to seek happiness?
I mean, I think we all do, right? To some extent, because we're all striving to we all had this idea that eventually at some imaginary point, right, we're gonna be like, yay, and life's gonna be grand and everything's gonna be great if we just get these things and get that thing and get this other thing, and then it's all there and in place.
Yeah. And how'd that work out for
Yeah.
you?
Doesn't work out, right? I mean, because I remember, I know you went through the same, right? You went through the same thing. I remember getting out of high school and I was like, okay, I just got to go to college. Then I just got to do this, got to do that, like everybody says, and then I'll be happy. And it's like, no, I'm still not.
Dude, I remember the exact moment when I was in high
Yeah.
school and I was like on the side of the building and I was like, if I just become a veterinarian, then everything will be good in life. And I've
Yeah.
20 years later, nah,
Oops,
sorry. Totally
that wasn't
wrong.
it.
Totally wrong.
Spent a lot of time trying though.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
God.
Yeah, and by all I mean, I have been tricked by that delusion my whole entire life. This idea that there's like a finish line, a happily ever after, or whatever it is, this thing that I can get to that once I get there, everything will work out.
Well, it's funny. I remember when I first started reading philosophy in undergrad. That's one of the things that really, really interested me was I started noticing all these different people talking about the good life and terms that were unfamiliar, in from what we're used to hearing. And I was like, maybe it is not this. Maybe it is something else. And I thought it was a really interesting thing to think about because most people have pretty much, I think, a pretty, similar notion of happiness, right? They think of it as no pain, all comfort, everything's good. It's and it's really, I think, a problematic notion because it sets you up for failure and that without a doubt you're not going to reach that, and it
Yeah.
focuses on the wrong stuff too. It focuses all on external crap rather than your mental state, you know your health, anything that would be related to you actually doing well, you know
Anything that you have control over.
yeah,
Your happiness does not
yeah,
depend on that. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because the idea for this came. I just listened to this book called Beyond Happiness. Amazing book. Okay. And it talks about how our pursuit of happiness is so wrong because happiness is by definition a fleeting emotion. Like it's
yeah,
a feeling, it comes and it goes, just like every other feeling. And we want this feeling to stay forever. So
yeah,
in that book, she talks about how satisfaction is a much better idea of something to pursue, but also, like you mentioned, the things that we have control over, those are actually what we should be focusing on in order to reach this state of satisfaction, as opposed to having everything work out and then be
yeah.
happy.
I think that no, I think that's important. Is reframing, what our goal is. So instead of because happiness one is a vague goal, and the notion of it's just terrible. I think because you're right. It's all about this feeling that's by definition fleeting. It's not something that should stay. And if it did stay, there would be something wrong with you because
Yeah,
if you
right.
think about it, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
regular life just ain't gonna work out that way. And I think yeah, it's reframing into something else. I like also a lot of the philosophers that talk about it in the sense of success, well-being. I always like using the term the good life because I think it just kind of captures the idea of that's what I'm after, not feeling happy all the time or not even comfort all the time because I still expect my life to have struggles, obstacles, difficulties, but having success, having satisfaction, those are all good ways of kind of thinking about what you want, right?
Yeah. And here's another thing that she said that it rang so true, but at the same time it's something that's almost counterintuitive. Was she's like, you're going to live your most satisfied life when you're like right on the edge of discomfort and fear. Like literally when you're right on the
Yeah.
cusp of being uncomfortable, doing the things you fear most, that's where you're actually finding satisfaction in life. And the crazy thing is that that place is always going to be changing because once you approach a fear, all of a sudden that and you become comfortable with it, then you're back in the comfort zone. You have to kind of expand it again and again.
That does make sense though, right? Because it's in those areas where like, we feel the most like reward from accomplishing things, like where we're overcoming stuff, we're still challenging ourselves, so we're learning, we're growing, and that feels good. I mean, anybody that's ever like, pursued anything on their own, they solve a difficult problem, right? It feels good. You realize you're able to do something. That's why I always like it's something like Nietzsche talks about, like reevaluating suffering, looking at it as a positive thing. Like when we struggle and with things in our lives, instead of like turning away from those obstacles, facing them and seeing them as an opportunity to overcome ourselves, right? To like continue growing, to continue like becoming something different. And there should be satisfaction in that, which there is. And I think that's a good way to look at it. I like that.
Hmm. Yeah,
You know,
but I
yeah.
can see in my life all
Okay.
these areas where I was like pursuing happiness, and it's just like even if you catch it for a glimpse, like the moment you have it, you just start trying to hang on to it, which makes it slip away even more quickly. And then like
Yeah.
when it's gone, you're just like, oh no, now I need to get it, and you're just like you're literally like struggling just to keep your head above water.
Well, I think that's the problem too, right? Because once somebody asks you if you are, then it's gone.
Oh gosh,
In that
I
moment,
hate
because then
that
you
when
think
people are
about
like,
it.
"Are you happy?" I was like, "I was until you asked." Like,
I
you
wasn't thinking
jerk.
about it, so yeah, it's yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah. Well, I think it's so hard too because I think we all are like, raised with similar ideas and values, with people telling us all these things that we should be doing, that we should think about, that we should pursue, that are, good for us. And like it really, I think a lot of people get through a long time in their life before they even start thinking about what they actually want. I know I did. I know you did, right? Because we were like,
Hmm.
you trust other people that are older than you have at least some idea, but it turns out they don't.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah.
Dude, and then there's like the whole the impatience of not having what you think will bring you the happy life. So like
Oh
right
God,
now,
yeah.
we're both doing this programming stuff, always learning new stuff. And today I was just like I was just driving myself insane because I literally just started learning something new today. And I was like, oh, this is going to take forever to learn. How am I ever going to learn this? This is crazy. And then I'm thinking back to that like Gary Vaynerchuk quote that we shared the other week. It's like, there's no reason to be impatient because I'm only competing with myself and I have my whole life to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was thinking
Yeah.
about that and I was like, you know what? I don't have to know how to do it completely today. Like I can just learn it. But it's like the innate nature. Like I've programmed myself to be like, oh, if I don't have the final product right now, ah,
Well, I think that's a lot of, that's why a lot of people too, like stop doing things that they want to do or because they think it's too difficult because they don't get it all at once. And it's like, well, you're not going to. That's why, people make whole careers out of it. Or that's why, it's like people spend all this time trying to become experts at something because it's not something you can grasp in one day. But I do the same thing. Like, it's like you start something, you really enjoy it. And it's like, so you think you should know it all now. And it's like, it's an absurd way to look at your life and your progress too. It's just ridiculous.
yeah, it's like comical. I like when I'm in it, I'm just like, oh, this is so frustrating. And then I step outside of it and I'm just like, who on earth do I think I am? Like, look at the ego on this guy.
I know. It is funny, right? Like everybody else has to spend years doing this. I should get it in 2 days
I
at the
know, right?
most.
Yeah.
Anymore, I'm a failure.
And why haven't I been hired after applying for 8 jobs? What the heck's wrong with the
Yeah.
world?
Oh God, it is funny.
Yeah.
Why, that's the other thing that's funny too. I think that gets in the way of it is like we form this idea that happiness is like these certain like accomplishments that'll bring us usually just money without anything else attached to it. And it's like, and then we build up all these expectations that are so unrealistic. At least I know I do, and I mean I have in the past. I've been trying not to as much anymore, but like, and it just is like a constant letdown that can like it really sucks too because I think we like torture ourselves, and then you run into this problem too where you get to this point where like it's almost like working against you to have the life that you want at all because you'll eventually quit or give up or something because you just get so beat down from your own like internal voice yelling at you.
Hmm. Yeah. It's tricky because you really need to I think like the older you get or maybe the better you get, you need to be like so much more conscious of being present. because otherwise
Oh
it's so
yeah.
easy to just get lost in these stories. Like, for instance, all these things that we have that annoy us right now, or most of them, at one time they were something that we wanted. Like the car is breaking down. Well, there was one time when you really
Yeah.
wanted that car. Or you can't stand going to your job, you hate your boss and your coworkers. Well, there was one time when you applied for that job and you were really happy when
Yeah.
you got it. Or
They
like
didn't
your
just come
part
pick you up off the streets and put you in there.
yeah, or your partner's driving you up the wall, and it's like there was one time when you were really, really excited to be with them. So like all these things that we want, we cause our own problems nonstop. And I think it's because, maybe we're not even present for what they are anymore. We're just lost in this fantasy about what they were or what they should be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's really interesting too, because I think you're right. I think, we also like I think you know what I think it is too. Like we get these things that we really wanted, like say like a partner or a job or something, but we don't we think once we because we have this idea in our head that once we have it, that's it. It's done. And so it should be fine, but we take it for granted immediately then, instead of doing any work to keep it good. Like because like, relationships, even work, like you can get if you don't do anything at work to challenge yourself, you're gonna get bored, right? So like finding new things that are interesting, actually putting forth some effort to change situations so that they stay, good for you. And I think we just take things for granted and expect them to just like we're entitled to it. And it's like that's the idea. And it kills us. Yeah. It's a really good point. I like that one.
Yeah. And
It's good.
there was something that I read in The Magic of Thinking Big that stuck with me, and I tried to do it once and I gave up. But it was like it was like
Too hard.
yeah, I know. But it said something along the lines of really successful people actually have a plan for liking people. Because like I find it so easy to not like people, to judge them, to pick out their faults and flaws and everything. And it was talking about, I think it talked about like Lyndon Johnston, how he had a plan for liking people. And, it was like remember their names, get the scratchy elements out of yourself, be like an old shoe type of person, do a whole bunch of other stuff. And I started doing it towards some people that I had some like grudges or resentments against. And I gave up because I just didn't want to continue doing it. But it like makes sense because it's like, I'm causing myself to not like them. So like I could take the control over what I have and actually cause myself to like them.
Huh. That's an interesting point too. Like, and just like, well, I think that gets too, like, of like just getting rid of like unnecessary stress too in your life and like things that just like are causing you pain or unhappiness anyway by just kind of like focusing on that, I guess is a good way to look at it. That makes sense. Yeah. And also just to maybe treat people better in general, it might be helpful in that sense too.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting. I mean, like we just have like, I don't know, we just torture ourselves all the time. It seems like it's so funny how we are so ill-equipped. Like we all want to be like we all want to be in a good state, yet we're so ill-equipped to get there by either like I don't know what by what thing it was, but like yeah, it's just we're terrible at it.
Dude,
It's really
I'm
weird.
I'm right there with you. I'm so shocked that we have made it as far as we have. Like
Yeah,
it blows my mind. It's like we have
we're not
no
like lemmings.
yeah, dude,
Yeah,
we have no capability for enjoying life in any type of sustainable way. Like we can just enjoy it and go way overboard and then there goes life. Or we could just be
yeah,
miserable the whole time. But like a sustainable enjoying life, it's like we're so terrible at that. We're destroying the earth. We're like the only species on the planet that if you remove us, the earth would actually do better. And
yeah, yeah,
like
without doubt.
everything we do, we just like we complain about like cockroaches and pigeons and rats, and it's like they only exist around human civilization. Like you won't find them out in nature. And
We
it's like
also brought them everywhere with us.
I know, right? Like it's just craziness. Yeah. I think
It's fun. It's the fact you mentioned it too. It's funny. It's like I don't know. We just like, I know this is myself too. Like, we just take things for granted. We don't do any work. And like, I think that's my biggest problem too. I notice is like, I expect things just to be this way. And then I start looking outside. I start comparing myself to other things. Or like, even though like I might be happy with what I have in some area, then I start looking outside and then I get unhappy or dissatisfied. Well, I was happy a minute ago. So what happened? Right? It's because I made these comparisons that are unrealistic or, unnecessary. It's like we constantly look to be dissatisfied rather than look to be satisfied. Like you said, like we're not present, we're not focused on what we actually have. And I think it's like it takes so much work to shift that thinking because it's like you've been just indoctrinated your whole life to think that way. So it's like it also takes a lot of work. So it's very hard. Yeah.
It's one of those things where like if you can catch yourself doing it often enough and replace it with
Yeah.
something that's good, that it makes a huge difference. Like I'm not sure if you remember, but probably like 3 or 4 months ago, we were talking about how like I was feeling great, went to the locker room at the gym. There was this dude who was shredded, and all of a sudden I was
Yeah.
miserable because I compared myself to him. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we talked about that, and I like made it up in my mind to just be like, well, good for him, you know? And then like that's happened a few times since then where I'll like go into the locker room being like, yeah, I had a great workout. And then there's this dude just standing there like freaking Adonis. And I'm just like, instead of getting miserable, I'm like, well, good for
He's
him.
like, "Did you have a good workout?"
I know, right?
You
But like,
puny little guy.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I'm like, well, good for him. And it totally lets go of any comparison, any like negative feeling that I had about it because it's just like I can celebrate it for him. Great. I don't need that, you know? Like it's not going to
That's
improve
a
my life
yeah.
one bit.
That's a good way to look at it too, I think, because like you shift the kind of way you're thinking about it. Instead of making a comparison, you're just like, okay, so they wanted that and they did it.
Yeah,
Great,
and like it happened today. Like I went to the locker room, there was Adonis waiting there, and like I was like, good for him. And I was laughing about it like when I was changing in my locker. I was just like, of course this would happen. But like it's one of those things where it's like it didn't bother me anymore because I was okay with not having a comparison.
Well, you know what's funny with comparisons too? It's like the sense of entitlement's really funny because it's like we look at these other people and it's like, well, why don't I have that? It's like, well, do you spend that much time? First of all, it takes a long time to do that. It takes a lot of effort. Do you have that time? Do you want that life? Is that what you, because if you want that, well, then you should do it. But if you don't want it, like, we make all these comparisons and it's like we think we're entitled to like whatever the hell these other people have, and it should just be given to us rather than like actually thinking about like what's involved. And I think if you start to think about like what's involved, it can help a lot. Like I know that helped me like actually asking myself, do I even want the life that that person has? Like, would I want all of it? And that's a good way to like kind of actually really reframe the question rather than just like looking at it and being jealous. Because I think a lot of it is jealousy and like envy and stuff like that that kind of motivates those sorts of comparisons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also forgetting to compare ourselves to those who have less than us. Like,
Yeah.
here's the crazy thing. There's a book called Factfulness, and I read it because Bill Gates said it was like one of the most impactful books he ever read. And he's a guy who reads a lot of books. And so I read it, and basically, like, if you have running water, a,
Oh yeah.
a
Oh
bicycle, and like
yeah.
a bed and food, you are in the top 1% of the world.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, it's really bad. Yeah.
And it's like everybody in America is like, no freaking way. That's not true. I'm not on, lifestyles of the rich and famous. I'm not married to Beyonce. I don't have this. I don't have that. And it's just like, no, like literally looking at all of human population that's alive right now, if you have a bicycle, a bed, warm meal, and running water, you're in the top tier of life.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah, we
remembering
don't
that.
like no, it's interesting because you're right. Like if you actually like we get it in our head, and I think that goes back to entitlement. We get in our head that like most people have the stuff that we're seeing, when in fact it's like because you see it a lot, but the reality is it's such a rarity. And if you look at most people, they have way less, and it's really bad. And like so, I think yeah, that's a really good point, which is like kind of put it into perspective. Think about like where you sit, because that can be a helpful way to kind of stop making those stupid comparisons in the first place. You
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. Because it's not something that makes
But
anybody more happy.
no, no, it's not. What's
Mm-mm.
helped me a lot too is actually just like every time I start to think that is comparing myself to myself from the past. And like
Mm.
that has been really helpful because like it's a comparison I can actually literally make because I know all the facts instead of just making
Right?
assumptions. I also know what it took, so I know the work involved, so I can feel good about it. It's like celebrating your accomplishments again. It's really nice. But the more I've been doing that, the more it just like keeps things in perspective and makes me just like realize like, oh, I am doing well. I just got to keep going, and more will come. And I
Mm.
think And I've noticed like the more I do that, the better it's been getting because like I've been seeing my improvement. I get to kind of re-celebrate things the accomplishments I did have, and you just kind of keep reaffirming it, and it gives you the motivation to keep going.
That's a great point because I actually used that for some motivation the other day when I was like struggling again with learning. And I because I remember this article that I read a while ago. It was on Reddit or something about that, where it's like everybody's so focused on becoming a programmer in like 24 hours or a month or whatever it is.
I know,
And
right?
he's like, why not just be like, okay, I'm gonna be a really good programmer in 10 years. And like totally 100% reasonable because I have some friends right now who are senior developers and they've only been doing it for 5 years. So like totally
Yeah,
100% reasonable goal. And so I was thinking because you said comparing yourself to yourself, and this was something that was really helpful to me because I was like, okay, if I stick with this for 10 years and I'm not terrible, I'll be a pretty decent developer. And I'm like, okay, where was I 10 years ago? And then I was like, holy cow, like look at the changes that have happened in 10 years. And
yeah.
like that, all of that can occur in the, oh my goodness, all of a sudden it gives like a whole bunch of perspective.
Not to mention too, like yeah, it does. And like when you start to focus on something and really commit to it too, you just like it's insane. It is really crazy. Like over the course of like just like a short time. Like I look back in the 8 months ago, like the changes is just insane. Like the amount of like, my skill level, my ability, it's just crazy. But like I wouldn't notice it if I compare myself to people that are way beyond my level because it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't even make sense to make that comparison because they've been doing it for, I don't know how long they've been, it's like but now I'm focused on it, so I should be looking at myself. It makes way more sense to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just to give people a concrete example, 10 years ago, I was graduating vet school. And so, like, I got my first job as a veterinarian, and I barely knew how to like treat an ear infection, which is one of the simplest things you can do as a veterinarian. Like, graduated
Yeah.
school, magna cum laude, didn't know how to treat an ear infection. I was just lost. And then, like, fast forward, was working at emergency hospitals all by myself, doing all
Yeah.
types of crazy surgeries and everything totally confident and was able to like transition to a different career that I enjoy much more. But it's like all of that can happen in 10 years, in just 10 years. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, like fast forward your future 10 years into the future. What's possible then?
Anything, right? And I
Mm.
like that example too, because you're right. Like, you like we expect to be perfect at things too, like right when we start, but like you got your first job, you weren't, And I
Oh
know
my
like
God,
that's
no.
just how it always is, dude. Like I
Dude,
remember like oh my God, when I look back at my first teaching jobs too, dude, I was terrible because you don't know everything yet. You haven't had the experience. Things take way longer than they should. You don't, it's like it's just, but you get better, and then you look at it over time. It's like you see those improvements.
so funny story. Like, hopefully this will help people kind of relate to how crazy stuff can change. So my first job, I even though I did well in school, I had no idea what I was doing when I was actually there. And the first like couple weeks, they have another doctor go in the room with you, and then after that, they like try and transition you to doing it on your own. And I had so much fear around that I literally remember like one lunch, like sitting in my car, sweating bullets because today was the day that I had to go and do this on my own. What am I going to do when I don't know how to do something? And like literally just almost paralyzed by fear. Like I remember my lips and my hands going numb and sitting in the
Yeah.
car. And it's like it passed. Like I got through it. And it's like,
And you can ask a question.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like it's just crazy when you look back on it. That's why I think what you said, kind of comparing yourself to yourself, is so key because you can look at those instances where you encountered something you were scared of or that was really challenging, and then you got
Oh yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
And if you did it then, you can totally do it now.
Oh yeah. And you can totally get past it. And you also realize like you had the ability to do it in the past, you can do it now. And you have so much more that you bring with you now. Like I think that's also a big thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All that
We're
resourcefulness
talking
that you
about,
get now.
yeah, right. But I
Mhm.
think, to your point though, like you said earlier, like you think like you said that the book said like satisfaction's like a good way of measurement. I think too, like achievements, like looking at like that is a good way because like I think like we naturally feel good when we grow, like when we learn new things, when we accomplish things that we want to accomplish. And like the trick is knowing what you want, obviously, like because a lot of us spend a lot of time doing things that like other people think are good for us that aren't really good for us. But once you figure out what you want, I think like focusing on that instead of like the end goals of like these made up goals of happiness is such a better way to live because you can constantly kind of reaffirm like that you're doing well. You don't take things for granted. You can actually realize that, good things take work to be good,
Mm.
and just simply taking them for granted doesn't work. But we train ourselves to live in such a weird way. It is funny.
And it's also like the achievement and going after these things are difficult and then sticking with them and getting with them and eventually getting them. It's like a self-reinforcing cycle because in the beginning we lack confidence. We're like, oh, it's so hard, I can't do it. But you
Oh
start
yeah.
doing it and you start building up momentum and proof that you can do it. And then you'll stick with it, you'll become a closer, like you start to do it over and over again. And then you have that confidence that you think that buying the next thing, or if you were the greatest person, then you would have that confidence. And it's like, no, that confidence comes from believing in yourself and just doing it.
And it's funny too, like you mentioned too, like changing jobs and stuff. Like I think people are so afraid to do that because they think once they're in something, like that's it. Like they shouldn't because they don't have time or that it's too much. And it's like once you realize how easy it is and how much better it is, I think you're able to because like we all forget, I think, like we're not like when you go to school and you're 17, like we're not 17. Like we have all these skills that we bring with us already. You know how to learn. Like you can change anything. So if you're unhappy, just change it and do it. I think it's totally possible.
Dude,
Yeah.
I got that all the time. And I still get that all the time when they're like, you're changing careers, you're like 40. I'm like, yeah, I still have at least another 30 years of
Yeah.
working left. Like, you think I want to do that doing a job that I hate? No,
No.
no.
Exactly. Like,
But
dude,
they're
that's
like,
what's so funny.
isn't it so hard to become a vet? And I'm like, yeah, but it still doesn't make the job any more pleasurable.
But it's hard to become anything. But once you do it, you realize like you can do it again. And I think that's the other thing. Like, even though like, you know, I think, at least personally, I think the times if you just stay in something you hate, that's wasted time. At least
Mm.
if you try something new, put yourself out there, it might be hard, but at least you're gonna be way happier doing or way more satisfied, way more sense of achievement, and just generally a better person all around because you did something you wanted to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might as well fail trying doing something that you want to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's
Because
that's the
regret is
best.
the scariest thing, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants to nobody wants to be on that bed at the end of the day and be like, oh, I just didn't do this, didn't do that, didn't do that. No.
Yeah. I know that's something like it always blows me away these like people who are like in their because when I was young I did like the EST training landmark forum and stuff like that and I remember I was 18 years old so like it was mind opening for me but like there are these people who are like 70 80 different things like that and they would talk about the regrets like things that they wanted to do their whole entire life and they never even tried
Yeah.
and it's like yeah you can try it now but you're like 80. I mean, it's
Yeah.
better than nothing, but
Yeah.
get started.
It is still better than nothing though. That's the point, right? You still have
Yeah.
time. But I think like yeah, if you real as soon as you realize it, like you should start thinking about how you can break out of that then because it's not but this is it. I think we scare ourselves, right? We make ourselves scared so we don't chase it. We imagine like we're entitled to stuff and we, focus on what's outside of us rather than what we have control over. I think those are all why we just happiness is a terrible idea. It really is. Like
Ugh.
our notion of it is so bad, dude. It really is detrimental. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Ugh. Yeah. So I guess in a nutshell, that's why happiness is wrong. And that's why happiness
Yeah.
is not the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, reframe it.
Hmm.
It's better to just reframe it into something else.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, read that book, Beyond Happiness, because that was very interesting for me. I learned a lot from that. She even taught, I mean, she had
Books are
five,
awesome, aren't they?
dude, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Like every book I read, there's always something that I get from it. And such a great
You know what I like about it
use of
though? It's like
time. Hmm.
you let an expert spend all his time figuring stuff out and then they do it and you can read it in like a few hours.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah.
all that stuff and just get the highlights, you
Yeah,
know?
it's like having a whole bunch of personal assistants working for you.
Yeah, literally. Like it is. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Anything you want to know. It's awesome.
and the coolest thing is the bar is set so low. There's literally no competition. The average American reads one book a year. If you read
Yeah.
two books a year, you're doing
You're crushing it.
100% better. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
zero competition in the world. And so it's like yeah, it's such a great
I think
thing.
I read two last week. I think. And I was
I-
like, yeah,
yeah, it's
uh,
incredible. And they're so good. They're so good. Just don't read the Scarlet Letter, you know?
nope. I know we trash that all the time. I feel bad because I've actually never read it, but
I know,
still, I'm not
same.
going to.
Same.
Not gonna
We're
happen.
gonna get some angry letters from whoever wrote
And
the Scarlet Letter. Yeah,
it's really a good book.
I know,
Yeah.
right? So, anyways, in
Okay.
a nutshell,
Yeah.
that's why happiness is wrong. Don't go after happiness. Uh, thank you so much for listening to us. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.